I've been playing the saxophone since 1998, and I thought that I knew everything there was to know about breath support and how to blow into a saxophone. But a few years ago, I started to study the trumpet, and I discovered that I did not understand at all how the diaphragm and lungs function to actually move air through a wind instrument. And I suspect that most people who play the saxophone also don't know. So in today's video, I'm going to explain exactly how this apparatus functions, and then share with you some exercises I learned from my trumpet teacher that really had a dramatic impact on how I play the saxophone. And if you consistently apply these exercises, I'm sure they're going to fundamentally change your sound on the saxophone, for the better. So where does your saxophone sound actually come from? Your breath, right? I mean, assuming the instrument is in good working order and the reed's vibrating efficiently, it's really your wind power that makes all the difference. We all know that intuitively, but what does good breath support actually mean? For years, I heard the same advice over and over. Breathe from your diaphragm, support from the diaphragm, push from your diaphragm. And I'm sure you've heard it too, because it's the go-to fix for any issue having to do with breath support or breath control on the saxophone. Is your tone thin and weak? More diaphragm. Running out of air mid-phrase? More diaphragm. Having troubles with range, either high or low? Still more diaphragm. But here's the thing about that, and it's a really big thing. This advice is well-intentioned and can be a good visualization for saxophone players to fill their lungs with air. Contrary to popular belief, breath support does not come from the diaphragm. We can't even really feel our diaphragm, let alone push from it. Some teachers will even assign exercises aimed at strengthening the diaphragm, none of which are actually able to achieve that. As a result, some players will try and support from the diaphragm by squeezing their abs. On one hand, this could result in a little bit of a boost to your breath support because the abdominals are involved as secondary muscles in the blowing process. But on the other hand, I once met a saxophonist who developed a hernia from improper blowing and breathing technique, who had to stop playing for several years because of this injury. So let's clear this up now. The simple scientific truth is that the diaphragm is a muscle of inhalation and not exhalation, particularly not forced exhalation, which is what we're doing when we blow into a wind instrument. When we inhale, the diaphragm contracts downwards, creating a vacuum which pulls air into the lungs. And muscles can only exert force in the direction that they're contracting. So when we exhale or blow into a saxophone, the diaphragm is just relaxing. And that's it. It just goes back to its resting position, not exerting any force at all. But we've all felt breath support from that general region when playing the saxophone, so what's actually doing the pushing of the air? If someone tells you to push air from the diaphragm, they're describing something that is anatomically impossible. The real breath support, or wind power, comes from a group of muscles called the internal intercostals. These are the muscles found between the bones of your rib cage. And when you blow into a saxophone, they compress kind of like an accordion. And the stronger you can get that compression to be, the more breath support you'll have. Along with the internal intercostals, there are also secondary muscles of forced expiration, namely the abdominals and some muscles in the lower back, which is why you do feel a contraction in the abs when you're playing with good breath support. Unlike the diaphragm, which cannot really be strengthened, these muscles can become tremendously strong, allowing you to create a focused, high-pressure stream of air, which you can sustain for a long time. And that's the secret. You have to actually train the muscles that are responsible for pushing air out of the lungs. Now back to my trumpet lessons. Over the years, I've played the saxophone, flute, bass clarinet, regular clarinet, iwi, zaffoon, bagpipe chanter, bassoon, bass sarrusophone, ukulele, guitar, bass, pretty much any instrument that I could get my hands on. But when I finally picked up a trumpet, this was the first instrument where I was like, I really have no idea how to make any progress on this thing. So I started studying trumpet with a former student of Claude Gordon, a famous brass teacher who wrote a book entitled Brass Playing is No Harder Than Deep Breathing, which really intrigued me because for me, brass playing was something a whole lot harder than deep breathing. And what I discovered about Claude Gordon was that he was able to consistently get many of his students to develop ranges from double pedal C to double high C by first developing their wind power. One of the things I realized in comparing a trumpet to a saxophone is that it's pretty easy to get a sound out of a saxophone. With a soft enough reed, you can almost just passively exhale into the instrument and the reed will start vibrating. And in doing so, a lot of us develop kind of lazy breathing habits. Conversely, trumpet players can't get away with this. Aside from the fact that they have to learn how to use their lip as the reed, to create that brilliant focused sound that trumpet players are really known for, they have to learn to maintain and create an incredibly pressurized airstream. They don't just blow into their instruments, they blow through them, using much more wind power than we're accustomed to using on a saxophone. So to start developing my wind power, my trumpet teacher gave me exercises to do throughout the day without the instrument. And then he gave me an exercise to start my practice routine with every day. Now it took me quite a while to start seeing progress with the trumpet, but that's a story for another day. However, when I started to apply these concepts to saxophone, I noticed an improvement in the quality of my sound and the ease with which I could play almost immediately. Now that my embouchure was no longer compensating for the lack of breath support, I was able to play for longer periods of time with less fatigue in my face. In addition, my sound had more of a solid core to it, and I could play with a fuller tone across the entire range. The sound that I was now getting was something that felt forever out of reach when I was a younger player. And just as a side note, when I was in college, a Selmer C-Star alto mouthpiece felt too open for me to use, and I had to use a Selmer C. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but after I learned how to properly blow into a saxophone and supply wind power and breath support, I was able to play on mouthpieces with tip openings in like the 9 or 10 range. You certainly don't need a big mouthpiece to get a big sound, but it did feel good to be able to have the full spectrum of mouthpiece possibilities available to me. So now if I wanted to try a larger mouthpiece, I could actually test it out to see if it was something that would work for me. And on the other end of the spectrum, I'm now able to play very small tip openings with much harder reeds, like 4s and 5s, to experiment with that sound concept as well. So now let's talk about how to perform the breathing exercises so you can try them out for yourself. So the first thing we're going to do is find the muscles that we're going to be training. So to do this, stand up straight and then pull your arms behind you with your palms facing forward. And in this position, just breathe through your nose. Fill up completely, and then still in this position, exhale through the mouth. So what this does is force you to use the muscles that are responsible for forced expiration, and also it allows your lungs to be refilled to the maximum volume on the next exhalation. So we're going to do this 10 times. And on the 10th exhalation, when it feels like there's no more, we're going to keep squeezing the blowing muscles. This is called the long hold and squeeze. And it's a calisthenic exercise, almost like a push-up for your blowing muscles. So I want to caution you to make sure you do this exercise standing up, because sitting down, you can get pretty lightheaded. And even standing up, the first time you do this, it might feel kind of strange. And if you do experience any negative side effects like shortness of breath or lightheadedness, definitely stop to catch your breath and allow yourself to recover. So I'll demonstrate the full exercise with all 10 breaths. Remember, the important part is to keep your chest up the entire time so that you're properly engaging those muscles. And this is going to feel pretty tiring at first, so make sure you pace yourself. Now in the beginning, you'll want to keep your arms in this exaggerated position, just so you make sure you're getting the proper posture down. But once you know what it feels like to keep that lightly elevated chest, or keep the chest up, as Claude Gordon used to say, then you can just do this with general good posture. We can also apply this exercise to a saxophone and start our practice sessions like this every day. Take a big breath with the chest up and then play a low F and hold it as long as you can. And then when you start to run out of air, keep squeezing with the blowing muscles even after the sound stops, just like we did in the 10th breath on the first exercise. Then rest for a few seconds, and then continue down all the way to low B flat. It really doesn't matter how long you're able to hold the note. The important thing is the long hold and squeeze after the reed stops vibrating. And I have some saxophone related proof for you that this will definitely be worth your time. Have you heard of Lenny Pickett? You know, this guy. The thing that he attributes his incredible range to is the development of breath control and the ability to increase the speed of the airstream through what he calls strengthening the diaphragm, which we now know is in fact strengthening the internal intercostals and related muscles. If you're having that aha moment right now and can already see how these exercises are going to help your playing, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button, because it really helps out the channel and helps me get this message out to more people. If you want to take things further, check out the free masterclass in the bio, which contains a lot more information about all of this and additional exercises that can really have a huge benefit on your playing. And so that's the truth about breathing from the diaphragm. The diaphragm really isn't doing much at all. The diaphragm does get air into the tank, so to speak, but it's the other muscles of the chest, trained with exercises like this from the trumpet world, which over time turn your breath into wind power. So try these exercises out for yourself, let me know how it feels, and then drop a comment below to let me know your thoughts or if you have any questions. If you enjoyed this video, you might also like this one about how Top Tones for the Saxophone by Sigurd Rascher can really help you develop your Altissimo register if you stick with it for long enough.